Join me, Mark Windows, with Tony Hurst for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT at autonomousmedia.net.
Right, welcome to Windows on the World live Sunday evening, 9 o'clock in the UK along the Thames estuary. We do have a guest with us tonight. I'll leave Mark to introduce her in just a bit. I just want to say thanks to everyone for joining us, and I'm looking forward to the show. We've got some good stuff lined up this week. You've wrote a pretty excellent article that I read there earlier, Mark. How are you doing?
Very well, Tony, yes. It's quite good on this side of the estuary. Very quiet, very still, and in fact very peaceful, so that's always handy after the travelling that I've been doing recently. Yes, I wrote this article called New Age of Global Governance, which ties into the stuff that we've covered, how the New Age ties into global governance. And of course, the United Nations Agenda 21. We've done a show on that. You can find that in Windows on the World archive. And I put quite a few videos in there, actually. Even things like Britain's villages destroyed, because that's all part of this agenda. And it's got a lot of information in there, which I'm going to go through. There's also a really good video in there that I've linked from YouTube. It was a film that was made in the 80s called Gods of the New Age, and it correctly describes how useful idiots are taken on board with the New Age agenda. I've even got Yuri Bezmenov, the KGB defector, telling us in the West in the 80s how interested the KGB were in gurus and yoga, because, of course, they can be used to control minds, which is what they're very good at. And he's just laying it out matter-of-factly that, yes, useful idiots, including the Beatles, unfortunately, were all part of it because they had the Maharishi there. And, of course, these people were devoted to these absolute narcissists who had no empathy for anyone else apart from themselves. And that was all through this kind of interpretation of Hinduism. We've been onto all that stuff. So quite an interesting thing, really. And it ties into the other articles that I've done, like the Global Local Cabal and Big Society Change Agents, which comes in at number 3 this week. And that contains a lot of the background of how this is being implemented, this global governance that nobody knows about, and it's being implemented, but in a very draconian way. But before we go into all this, and Sandi's going to join us in the second part of the show, or maybe before, to talk about what's happening down in Somerset and also the goals of Agenda 21, because Sandi actually contributed to this article, and it was her article, really. You could say I contributed to it, if you want to split hairs over it, but we don't do things like that on here, do we, Tony?
We don't.
No, we keep the information for all, but we're not really collectivists. We're individuals who stand up for collective rights. I think we should make that clear before the show starts. But yes, Sandi's added a lot of the background and things like the biosphere and the noosphere, and this will be totally alien to many people, and it's all about this theoretical fake science that has been used to enslave people through the New Age and whatever else they can find to coerce people into giving up their rights, especially their inalienable rights. And that's what I wanted to talk about first of all, because it's very interesting. We've got this kind of paradigm now of everybody that's outside the politically correct paradigm is racist, or they're hate-filled. It's all about hate. So anything outside this paradigm is hate. Now, I just wanted to go into this, which I prepared a few hours ago. I've been thinking about this for a while, and also it's part of my talk. I do a talk called The Post-Truth World, and it relates to this stuff, but it goes into great detail. But what I wanted to do was preface what we're going to talk about tonight with a very simple analogy of what this is all about. So in reality, there are no conspiracies. Everything is in the open. You're not being told, as the state assumes, that it is not in your interest. That's very important. It's not in the public interest to know most of this stuff. The state do not inform even their own agents, because the real power is the deep state. The truth is way above the reach of the public, and it's fenced off for those who are entitled to it. This has always been the case, and that's why a priest class exists and has existed for thousands of years. And this is also described by another Soviet defector on YouTube. Unfortunately, it's all in subtitles, and it's quite laborious, but he talks about the way that the upper echelons are a complete mystery to the public. They do not know anything about what goes on behind the scenes, and the public are given unreality, and they're given lie one and lie two, and they're put between the two lies, and that's constantly what happens. If you look at our media and the way people are played, that's constantly it. Now, there are things the custodians assume you do not need to know. And everything is on a need-to-know basis. That's really important, because if you look at something within the system and you need to know about it, you can find out. So there are no secrets. It's like we're saying. There's no secret societies that call themselves secret societies, because they're openly telling you that they're there. So they're not secret. But there are secrets which can be disclosed to the public. For instance, especially within law. That's very interesting, how you get remedy in law, and that's very, very important to what we're going to be talking about tonight. So, for example, when a judge says something is not in the public interest, they mean it is not in the public's interest for them to know about it. The real facts would destabilise the way the consensus society works. So they do have a point there. I mean, in actual fact, they're protecting the public from knowing about things that would destabilise them. So in a way, you could say that they're doing the job of a custodian. Now, it is assumed by the state that the public could not and are not equipped to handle the real truth. So it is not made available to them. The education system now makes this even more apparent, and we're going to be talking about that a bit later on. And facts are down to belief. And we're finding this in the education system, that in Common Core, for example, in America, they're stating that facts are down to belief. Well, this is the post-truth world, and we've had 2 generations of people who have been educated into the post-truth world. We've also discussed the cult of narcissism. We've done a show about that. Funnily enough, it's had a lot of views, that one. And obviously, it's something that is on people's minds. Now, this was introduced by the social engineers to keep you focused on trivia and locked inside this autistic spectrum of self-absorption. And this stops the narcissist actually wanting to look outside the artificial womb of this fashionably dumb behaviour and thinking. The fake left and right is there to distract, whilst behind the scenes and now blatantly in the open is the global action plan of Agenda 21, which we talk about all the time. Now, Agenda 2030, we've got that, and also the Habitat conferences, which are all about these sustainable cities and people living in tiny boxes with no cars. Now, all this is through the unelected world government, the UN, and the UN are above international law and cannot be prosecuted, and that's stated in their own charter. So basically, the UN are a lawless world government. That is what they are. They are above and beyond international law.
Yep.
So this is world government. Now, there's also these terms that float around. Communist, fascist, Nazi, whatever, take your pick. They all mean the same to those under global governance. Now, last week and many times before, we've discussed this new global governance, which the majority of the public know nothing about. Now, world iron fist communism, enforced through the UN at local level, threatens individual rights, your economic freedom and private property, all laughably done in the name of environmentalism. So under the Soviet system of subversion, the public are given 2 competing lies. And this is what we're talking about. Now, the thing is that when we talk about these different systems, communism, fascism and Nazism, basically you're talking about state control. You're talking about the state is the big controller. In other words, government doesn't work for us, we work for them, we're controlled by them. Our rights are given to us by the state. No, our rights are inalienable. And I'm going to get to that in a minute, because that is the key to all this, I think.
Yep.
Now, they can be right and left. Let's have a look. The left and the right, the fake left and right. This is just a puppet show. Recently, Antifa, yeah, and its brainwashed social justice warriors against so-called Nazis, who of course haven't existed since 1945, or the far or even the alt-right. Now, both of which are media creations. So this far-right and alt-right are basically media creations, yeah? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are extremists, but I'm saying that this is clearly an invention of the media, yeah? Same as Antifa has been an invention of the media, in the respect that if Soros would have thrown all that money at it and it hadn't got into the media, then it wouldn't have taken off. So this is all media driven. Everything is media driven. So we live in a media driven world and not a news and information driven world. That's really important and something we go on quite a lot, isn't it, Tony?
It is, yeah. Well done.
Now, these manipulation techniques are beyond Orwellian. It's a mind virus, really, of describing everything outside the fake collective paradigm as hate. We've also gone over that in great detail with our shows on Hope Not Hate, funded by the Joe Cox Memorial Fund, and also funding the mercenary white helmets who are murdering civilians and Syrian soldiers under the name of benevolence. So again, it's the post-truth world. And of course, the Joe Cox Memorial Fund also funds Hope Not Hate, which is a hate-filled organisation which actually states that it promotes tolerance, which is really funny. Yep. The unelected state agents of the media give what sometimes seem like opposing views, but never actually get to the real problem. Now, it doesn't matter what you watch, Russia Today, Sky News, BBC, this is always the case. The real problem is never addressed. And this is the genius simplicity of just controlling the narrative. So Associated Press and Reuters, who are two PR agencies, repeating the same and sometimes slightly different versions of the same story. And I had an argument with a Reuters cameraman, and he said, I've been there, I've been in war zones, I've done this, I've done that. And at the end of the evening, he said, well, actually, yeah, you're right. I hadn't got a bloody clue what was going on now.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. Now, what the useful idiots do not understand, right, is that there is ultimately no difference between communism, fascism, and National Socialism. They all put the state before your God-given, inalienable rights granted to you according to ancient systems of common law and natural law, and also laid out in the Bible. Now, whether you believe this is a religious issue or not, the Church have revered this document as truth in law. For instance, when you go into a court, you swear on a Bible. That puts it above the state. Your oath is above the state. Your oath is to God, right? That's very, very important. And that really does reinforce our inalienable rights over the state, because it's God who gave us our rights, not the state. So the state then is not in a position to grant these rights or take them away. And that is central to the whole issue of what we're talking about week in, week out on these shows. Now, and this is why the new global communist system needs to destroy natural law and Christian beliefs on the back of diversity, multi-faith, Maitreya, and basically the all-in-one New Age shopping mall of global doctrines promoted by the UN and its enfeebled Luciferians, and then swallowed whole by these gullible narcissists and the hopelessly lost and naive. And that is really what the New Age is all about. Now, how many times have you heard people parroting, there should be a law against it? People are always saying that, aren't they? Oh, there should be a law against it. Well, they're assuming by saying that, that the state interference will solve the problem.
Yep.
Well, it won't, right? When in reality, especially in this corrupted corporate arena we now live in, this intervention will always make matters worse, right? It will always result in perversion of truth and natural law. This is whenever you get the state taking over. When bureaucracies get bigger and bigger and bigger, corruption increases, right? It will always end with the innocent beaten down or locked up with no remedy and no law. It will always be misused for more power and control. See all anti-terror laws for proof of this. No law has and will ever stop terrorism, which is what, by its very nature, is always outside and beyond the jurisdiction of the state. Now, that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because the anti-terror laws are there to shut us down. They're there to stop dissent against the state, not against terrorism. And that's what we're finding. The anti-terror laws and the Reaper laws and all this nonsense that's come in is there to shut our individual rights down.
Totally.
So, in other words, have a look at that, because that is, to me, really, really important, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Now, no law has and will ever stop terrorism. This is the truth, yeah? Whether it's state-sponsored or not is of no consequence.
Of course not.
And there is no evidence that in any civilized society that more laws keep anyone safer. In fact, it's the reverse. More laws mean more offences, right? More laws mean thought crimes. More laws mean people getting absolutely fed up and frustrated with the government for imposing it on them, because most people are generally law-abiding, and that's what they don't want us to know. They go, oh, there'd be anarchy. Well, wait a minute. Anarchy means self-governance, you prat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
You can't win with these people. You can't win because they're coming at it from completely the wrong direction. So, say in communism, fascism or national socialism, the state grants you your rights through statutes. You are beholden to the state to the point where not only your rights are terminated, but ultimately your life can be too. And these Soviet defectors will tell you that. That's exactly what they're telling you. All of these Antifa lunatics, all these people, these useless idiots will be slaughtered, right? If and when this iron fist world communism comes in, they will be the first to go. And the Soviet defectors laugh at those people. They were the first to be used and the first to be sacrificed. What they wanted was rich narcissists. I mean, that's really interesting. And we know what rich narcissists are like. We see them in the media. So the state control always ends in corruption. So the bigger the state, the more corruption. Bigger the state control, more corruption. Bigger the bureaucracy, more corruption. Look at today's bought-out traitorous puppets. Here's a few: Sadiq Khan, Amber Rudd and Theresa May. Most, if not all, careerist MPs and politicians are just the same. They're there just to feather their own nest. They cannot help you, and they do not have the actual ability to help you because they don't know how anything works. And that is the problem. People who do know how things work quickly get ganged up on by those who don't know how things work, you know. So add to this the lobbyists, corporate stakeholders, change agents, corporations and NGOs openly restricting your rights for this increasing lust for power by the state. This is all what this Agenda 21 stuff's about. Therefore, the only antidote to tyrannical despotism is small, elected and fully accountable government. And that is it in a nutshell. It has to be small, elected, accountable government. So the bigger the bureaucracy, like the EU, again, people who say, oh, Brexit, you know, oh, I'm a Remainer. Well, they're not understanding, yeah? They don't understand that the bigger the bureaucracy, the bigger the lies, the more the tyranny. That's all it is, yeah? That's historically a fact. And you can look that up and you will not come to any other conclusion. Yep. Yeah, that's an absolute fact. Equality and social justice, now here's the thing, are the refuge of the useful idiot and clever tyrant. Equality is not a given, right? There's no, this thing about equality is nonsense. If all men are created equal, then they should be judged only by their actions for proof of equality, right?
Yep, so it makes sense.
Your actions prove that you are equal. You are equal in moral stature to somebody who is also high in morals or has good moral stature. So this equality is absolute rubbish. There is no standard for equality, which is why there is none. So there's no equality. There isn't any equality because there's no standard for it, right? That's really important. The new way that so-called equality is enforced is all about status and power for use over the historically but now redundant inalienable rights of others. That's really important because equality is now used to trample over other people's rights, yeah? Mm-hmm. Like social justice is all about no rights for all, as it reduces everyone's rights and means that those rights are only granted by the state. Again, God grants us inalienable rights. It's in the Bible. It's in ancient systems of common natural law. So the state is assuming that we are property. And under this global governance, we are property to the extent that they can terminate us whenever they want to. But it's all done under saving the planet and carbon dioxide. I mean, this is so ridiculous. I mean, if you, again, look at the analogy. If you're an intelligence that's come down from another planet, you just would not believe that the public could be this stupid. I just can't see that any intelligent being could look at this and go, yeah, that works. They wouldn't, would they? Just laugh at it.
It is a puzzler.
It is a puzzler, isn't it?
Mm.
Now, the state intervention of granting rights to so-called minorities is nothing more than a clever divide and rule manipulation technique. It is to further destabilise society, to bring in more legislation, which means nothing can be criticised. Right or wrong under natural law becomes irrelevant, and trivial nonsense is the norm, and that's the problem. Everything focuses on the trivial. Nothing of importance is ever addressed. Like identity politics is the refuge of the destitute, and there are millions of them out there. There's millions of destitute people, politically destitute people who don't know anything about how anything works. Now, political correctness is evil and it stifles reason. It creates resentment, it disempowers people and causes mental anguish. The result is frustration and hatred and the creation of racism and xenophobia. So that's really ironic, because political correctness actually creates racism. And when you think about it, it does. Think carefully about that one. I mean, most of our listeners won't have to, because they'll get it straight away. Yep. But it's a good one to think about. And this is just what the social engineers need to keep the public looking no further than their noses. So, for instance, we've talked about this so many times. How many times have you encountered a traffic warden or a petty tyrant who calls you a racist or some other identitarian hashtag because you have challenged them for issuing an illegal ticket or fine? So in other words, it becomes a distraction issue. The racial issue is there to distract away from some criminal activity. Like, especially in the case of traffic wardens in Camden, I can vouch for that. You know, that's actually, I've got first-hand evidence of that. Now, political correctness feeds fear in the public that they might be called bigoted and racist, which is the weapon of choice for the subversives and social engineers against these Soviet subversion techniques. This so-called empowerment and diversity is nothing of the sort. It is to keep the public fighting against each other with distraction and nonsense, which stops them seeing the bigger picture. The media uses this distraction and sets useful idiots against each other, often in endless and pointless arguments presented by dumbed-down, politically correct and terminally brainwashed drones. Day after day, they slug it out. It's pointless. And the opposing narratives just keep coming. And they just keep the public distracted all the time from the central issues that are never addressed. And this is also exploited by NGOs, non-government organisations, and racist so-called minorities who assume elevated status over others who do not have or even assume the same sense of entitlement. And the only justice is that which follows truth. The truth is now the enemy of the state. That's really important. We're in the post-truth world, and truth is the enemy of the state. We have a bureaucracy that lies. All it does is tell lies. We talk about this all the time. We've encountered them for years and years on end, and it's only going to get worse. It will only get better when we have small, accountable government and elected officials, not unelected bureaucrats. Another one for the Remainers, right, is that is an oligarchy of unelected, overpaid communist subversives. That's what it is. So don't think it's all about multiculturalism and joy and happiness and fluffy bunnies. It's not. It's about iron fist communism. These people actually are very serious about what they're doing. Now, we're going to look at some short clips as well tonight, Tony, which I think define what I'm talking about. Now, the first one is some unelected bureaucrats in California informing us on what rights she's going to take away and how she's going to do it. Now, listen to this. This is quite interesting.
Okay, here we go.
I take responsibility for the pain that my decision will cause you. I'm going to vote to take away your parking because when I look at the bigger picture, I'm responsible to the bigger picture. People talk about inconvenience. I know it's not just going to be an inconvenience for you. You're going to suffer, and I appreciate that, and I'm responsible for that, and I'll take the responsibility for it. But this decision that we're making tonight is 50 years into the future, 100 years into the future, and that's my job, is to make that decision.
Right, that's nice. She's going to take responsibility for it. Happy days. We're all right then.
Yeah, that's great. She takes full personal liability then, eh?
Yeah.
That's great, isn't it? Because what about the elderly people that might die as a result of parking spaces being taken away so their family can't get to them? So she's going to be liable for that as well.
Yeah, get your claims in now.
I would, yeah. I think that's great. That's Kathy Murillo there from California State, which is now the One Bay Area. And there's a great YouTube channel by a guy called Grindle61. He's been hammering away at Agenda 21 for years. In fact, he puts videos up every few hours. And they're often public meetings that he's gone into. And he asks very, very, very interesting questions. And also, in certain cases, makes statements, as in the next clip. Could you play that one, Tony?
Yep, here we go.
Number of comments we're going to limit to each speaker to 2 minutes, please. Keep your comments focused.
Well, I have a prepared, it's about 3 minutes. But... Good afternoon, unelected regional board. I have waited a long time to do this. I found out some time back that this body that most people have never even heard of intends to spend $500 billion on a single plan. This is not getting paid for at the city council level. This is wholly funded by vehicle mileage tax, which means you intend on stealing $500 billion out of people's cars to pay to put them on the bikes. This plan is to put everyone out of their cars and onto bikes, buses, and trains. There is no arguing that this entity wants us out of our cars. Last year, the state of California tried to pass Senate Bill 350, which would cut all gasoline sold in the state by 50%. No gas means no cars. Thankfully, that bill has completely failed. SCAG's own numbers state that 95% of the population is driving around in cars, which means the vast majority of people wouldn't like this plan to begin with, but most people don't even know this is occurring. This is criminal. Where's the media at? Why aren't there 50 cameras back here documenting this is going on? This whole plan is based on lies. The phony science of global warming and climate change. Carbon dioxide is not a dangerous pollutant. If you believe in God, you know that it's not possible for CO2 to be bad for the planet. Plants need CO2 to live. We are told that millennials are just dying to live in tiny apartments, not drive, and hang out in parks all day. It's time for a little wake-up call. This came out the other day. It says, guess who's moving to the burbs? The millennials. This one also came out the other day. It says, millennials love to drive. Everything being presented is social engineering and propaganda. This is an LA Times article from a few days ago. Here's what it says about the drought. It says the best weapon against water shortages in the future is a sensation of crisis today. This is all propaganda and social engineering, all $500 billion of it. I went to a meeting a few months ago and I recorded Alan Walker refer to the Regional Transportation Plan as the Central Plan of Southern California. Central Plan. He admits it. This is central planning. Central planning is communism. Mao's China, Stalin's Russia did these 5-year, 10-year, 20-year plans, and here we are engaging in the same behavior. America was not planned. America exploded into being out of a revolution. America did not become great because it was planned. America became great because it was free, and all this planning puts everyone into a box, literally and figuratively. To show you that this is communism, the other day, I have another line to go. There's only a couple people speaking anyway. The other day, the LA Times, they had an article.
Sir, thank you.
I'm almost finished. To show you this is communism, the other day, the LA Times published this article that actually said the millennials want to live like communists, and then this article referred to this concept as sustainable communities, which is what this plan is based on. Don't approve this communist central plan. We don't need to change California into a smart slave grid, and don't need another $500 billion coming out of our pockets. Thank you for listening.
Can I just say that one of the things that I think makes this country great is that we can listen to all points of view. Really appreciate you being here.
Right, the irony of what the lady at the end there said is not lost on us, is it, Mark?
Not at all. I mean, she's treating it like it's his point of view when he's actually hit her with a load of facts, and that's what they do. They say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. And those people in that room, you couldn't see them, but you can see it on one of his videos. It's where he addresses the city council. Just go to Grindle61 on YouTube. And the faces are absolutely disgusting. They're sat there with these sick smiles on their faces, with this patronising look. They're not taking any of it in. And these people, again, are there to represent people like us. This is happening in council meetings in this country. This is how they act. They get these vile, disgusting people who are just interested in their bureaucratic careers and how much money they can screw out of things. And they have no liability and no interest in facts, none at all. And we've seen this in Waltham Forest with their puppet Clyde Lokes, who was put in there quite a long time ago after he got kicked out of Northampton. And nobody knows how he became Cabinet Member for Environment in Waltham Forest. But he is the useful idiot who got a 24% pay rise after implementing the open concentration camp, also known as Mini Holland, which, of course, is nothing of the sort. There's no people smoking strange tobacco. There's no red light zone, there's no business, and there's no people. So it's not really Mini Holland at all. Well, that would be Mini Amsterdam, I suppose. But in fact, the Dutch are meant to be the most content people in Europe, according to one surveyor. So I don't know whether that's true anymore, though.
I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to go on to the next one?
Well, yes. This is very interesting. This is a chap who's been obviously to one of these rallies, and it sounds like, if you listen to the preamble, that he's had a bit of a run-in with the likes of Antifa, and the police have decided to arrest him. Now, this is what seems to be happening. These people who were previously, very, very tolerant, and they can argue a point, they're rational, they're calm. These are the people that seem to be targeted by the police. So if we can go to the audio, man arrested at rally.
Yeah,
I think
ready.
it's the fourth one, Tony, yeah.
I'm ready. Okay. Oh, right, hold on. Right, yeah, you're playing them out of order, so I'm not ready. Okay,
So,
I am
Chief
now.
of Police, I have a question for you, Cosme. I'd like to know, I went to the September 6th court date following a 3-month period of time following my unjust arrest. Would you please tell me why the paperwork wasn't filed with the DA's office prior? Now, come on, Mr. Lozano. I know you can tell me what's going on. What happened? You know, are you telling me that the police officers in the department don't have the skill set to file paperwork on time? I know that can't be true. So tell me, Mr. Lozano, why is it that the paperwork wasn't filed on time? I filed my paperwork on time. Why didn't you file the paperwork regarding my arrest? And why did you call me out of order when I wasn't out of order in the first place? Sergeant Settles was making up stuff. I wasn't disrupting. Excuse me, sir. You're paid with taxpayer dollars. Wow, geez. You know, Chief of Police Lozano, there was no paperwork filed when I went to the September 6th hearing at the Downey Courthouse. Would you please tell me? When he purses his lips like that, it means he's nervous. So please tell me, Mr. Lozano, why didn't you file the paperwork? If you're not nervous, then you can answer my question. Why did you disabuse? Why do you not have a comment? Because you went out of your way to arrest a private citizen who did nothing wrong. Now you're wasting the DA's time and taxpayer money's time. Whoa, we got another runner. Excuse me, Chief of Police Lozano. Why did you not file the paperwork? Why did your lieutenants not do their job? I know that your lieutenants are skillful people.
Yeah, good question. So we didn't hear the lieutenant. I take it that was for legal reasons or whatever. But,
No, he didn't say anything. The guy is just stood there playing with his phone and won't address it. So the fella's gone to court. None of his paperwork's been filed. This chief of police is in there and he's asking him why the paperwork hasn't been filed. It's a simple question, and the guy runs away out of the court.
Wow. Well, I don't know what to say about that, as usual. Shocking stuff, really, but there you go. That's what's happening. A lot of people, it's been happening with the fracking protesters, protectors, whatever, and all sorts of other people in different areas and parts of the world for a long, long time now. You just get arrested and processed and taken through some big, distracting, time-wasting nightmare for you, and then nothing happens at the end. There's nothing they can do. So. Yeah,
absolutely, but it's all about demeaning you. And again, these are public servants. They're meant to be there to serve us. You know, we don't serve them. They're there for our protection. They're there to protect us. And now we need protection from them. Well, that's in my experience, the last encounter I had with Kent Police was that the two officers, when asked to come inside, I wanted to give a statement, both attacked me, which is not really what I was expecting, but probably the norm now round here. I don't know whether it's the norm in other parts of the country.
I don't know. I don't.
It seems to be here.
It's been a long time since I've had that, and I certainly don't want to be sort of like accusing all police of being that way, because we do, as we know, need the police. They're there for a good reason, and I'm pretty sure that there must be some fairly good eggs left in there, but it is becoming more apparent that for whatever reason that there is a lot of aggressive kind of psychopathic almost, if you like, police out there in all areas of the world again. So I don't think that's a coincidence, and I think we actually need the help of the decent police that are left and the military and all that if we're ever going to make any progress against the real hidden hand of what's going on behind the scenes. They'll be the people that will help us. So if I wouldn't want any of them not to come if we needed them. You know, we'd be on the phone to the police and get them to come. We want to get it back to a state maybe where it's never been, where the police do actually do their job and they work and serve and protect the people, which is what they was meant to be doing. But as most people that are listening to this will well know, the role of the police has changed quite drastically over the last few years, and I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of coppers out there that will be just as gutted and just as sickened by the actions of those that don't perform their duties correctly as what we are.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tony, but I think a lot of it's down to the training, and it's the personality types that are being attracted to it now. Yeah, you get the odd one that seems to be okay, but generally I'm finding that they are just there to make you a customer for the judicial system. In other words, they are looking for a crime to nick you for at every possible opportunity, and that's not really what they're there for.
It's not really crimes they're looking for; it's offences, isn't it?
Yes, but they have to create a crime, otherwise it's not an offence. You see.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, we'll have to have another chat about that another time. But I was figuring that an offence is not always a crime. I mean, if you chuck litter down on the path, for example, those are civil offences. But the police and other agencies, it doesn't matter if it's civil or criminal, they want to cause a controversy, don't they? Yeah,
that's what seems to be the big picture of it all.
Yeah, revenue.
Yes, revenue and causing controversy, but that also goes into the judicial system, because obviously that's the way they get their figures up. It's much easier for them to kind of help a crime along rather than say, well, nothing to see here, move along. Oh, there might be something. I'll look into it and I'll start probing around and I'll see if I can create any controversy. That seems to be what's going on now.
Okay. Well, I just got a comment from Mahatma in the chat saying, good eggs in the police force. Wow, I'm gone. Well, sad to hear that, but if you do look on YouTube, I know a lot of people look at videos of police behaving pretty badly, but there's also videos on there of police acting in a very good way to a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances as well, in a very friendly manner. So, have a look.
Yes, but that shouldn't be the exception, though, Tony. I'm not saying it is, but it's getting to be the exception in my interactions with them anyway, and what I'm seeing and how they approach members of the public often,
Yep.
So that's something that's kind of a side issue to what we're talking about. But going back to the article, we've been through all this stuff about the New Age, and I wanted to read out that Aldous Huxley quote again, because it's so prescient and so accurate as to what's happening, especially with what we're going to be talking about generally, the goals of sustainable development. This was in 1962. He said, there will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it. because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And that seems to be the final revolution. I think that might have been his way of saying final solution.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah, well, Huxley foresaw the coming one world government. He's brilliantly describing the global action plan implemented worldwide there. And the thing is about all this stuff that we talk about, how many of the public actually know about it? There's not very many, and that's astonishing when it affects every aspect of their daily life. So, again, put simply, for people who may not be really up to speed with this, and we're going to be talking about it for the whole 2 hours, it's a global action plan implemented at a local level for the control of all resources. It implements collectivism through consensus by unelected officials and takes away rights such as freedom of travel, private property, and individual freedom under a communist ideology based on environmental principles, such as the belief in man-made climate change. This results in high-density cities, cycling and walking instead of private transport, and huge taxation. It destroys self-employment and small businesses in favour of corporate partners. And we're seeing that all over London. The re-engineering of London is something that we've covered in great detail in many shows. And, of course, often featuring Piers Corbyn, brother of Jeremy, who's been a housing campaigner for most of his life. And this is where it gets interesting, because Piers is from the very old-fashioned left. But by the people now on the new left, he's considered right-wing, far-right, and even a Nazi.
Yeah, it's
and
absurd.
Climate change denier.
Yep, he gets all sorts of abuse thrown at him, does Piers.
I know, and that's the totally and utterly ironic thing, because he's stood up for housing rights, and he even took me round Maida Vale where they squatted it in the 70s, and they had the Clash staying there, and he was all part of this sort of very left-wing ideology. And, of course, we're in the post-truth world now. None of this matters anymore. There is no left and right. There's just right and wrong. So there is no left and right, just basically what is right and wrong. And what's right and wrong is actually being subverted. And that's really, really interesting, because you've got UNESCO. It's the education arm for programming the agenda of Agenda 21 and sustainable development into schools, and, of course, other policies and other initiatives by the UN. And it states that sustainable development has been embedded in the curriculum since 1994. It encompasses the whole 40 chapters of Agenda 21, and the goal is world citizenship. Each region has a director and a directorate, which they state make informed, reasoned decisions. Now, that's really interesting when you hear what these public officials actually say, because they are not informed and they never make reasoned decisions at all. They spout nonsense, which is corporate speak, and basically the language of sustainable development, like vibrant communities, diversity, etc. Now, this is Common Core education, and their manifesto states in Common Core that the teaching of facts is not the primary purpose of education. Can anybody see a problem here?
My jaw's still hanging open. Yeah, I can see a big problem.
Yeah, I know. The teaching of facts is not the primary purpose of education.
Well,
yeah. What can you say to that?
Yeah, what do you say? School, what's it for? Well, carry on, please, because there's so much to this Common Core business that we're going to get into at some point.
Oh, we are, yes. Yeah, I know you've been looking into it, haven't you?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Well, it calls for what they call the total transformation of society. Now, this is very interesting, because when we hear these words like change, this is the Obama thing, remember, change, but what? Change what? What are you going to change? They never actually tell you. It says no child will be left behind. Now, what they mean by that is you have to be part of the consensus. you are not allowed to have another opinion. That's what it means by not being left behind. So this is the police state in unreality. So it's unreality and a police state all rolled into one. With non-elected bureaucrats, they're sitting on these regional boards, and this includes businesses, teachers, and other appointed representatives and stakeholders. Yeah, the education is to be mandated voluntarily. Now, if something's mandated voluntarily, that's doublespeak, right?
Yes.
That does not make any sense.
It's a logical fallacy.
It's a logical fallacy. Mandated voluntarily, which means mandatory, right? So state education policy states that it is a waste to train people beyond their station in life. Now, wait a minute. So they're defining what level you're going to get to before you've even decided yourself. That's very interesting. It says here, now this is another huge assumption, students view themselves as facilitators and construct their own understanding of reality.
That's nice for them, if it's true.
Well, it must be great, you know.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic. Consensus is more important than fact. UNESCO states literacy of sustainable development is as essential as were the traditions of reading and writing. Note that they say were, that reading and writing skills were essential. Well, if you look around you today, you can see they're not. That's blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
Even when you look at the people who've qualified into journalism, they are illiterate.
Well, speech to text.
They cannot write.
Speech to text is taking over. It's a bit like maths went kind of out the window when the calculator come along, and now we've got speech to text. You don't really have to be able to read or write anything like that either, really. You know, you can just talk, and it all gets done for you. Corrected, grammar correction, spelling correction, and all that. Even though it comes out wrong most of the time at the minute, but they will get it better, no doubt. But yeah, shocking stuff.
Absolutely. So it changes their roles as individual and collective citizens. Okay. Now this is from the National Education Council. This is in America. Learning has not taken place until values are changed.
Until you've been brainwashed, then.
Yes, until your values have been changed.
That's nice.
So this is all out of Orwell, Brave New World, any science fiction dystopia, you know, it's all in there. 66% believe that government's responsibility is to redistribute wealth, which means poverty for all, right? So 66% of Turkeys voting for Christmas believe that it's government's responsibility to redistribute our wealth, right? They also believe, many students, according to this, that governments define property rights. Well, once you have lost your rights of private property, you have actually lost all your rights. You have to think about that. You have to think about what that actually means. That is really, really a serious one, and that is the biggest thing about Agenda 21, I think.
Yeah, is it not the case that a lot of people have been learning, though, that they don't actually own anything through the way that we run everything through debt? As in your mortgage, you think it's yours, but you really do know that each month you've got to pay the payment or it won't be yours anymore, and your car and all that. For a lot of people, it's that with their sofas and their tellies and all sorts, isn't it? So much debt out there. Is
it's
that
a slightly different thing, because under natural law, we can't own anything. Of course we can't. We can't actually own it. But what they are saying is we cannot possess it. Very different, right? Because to possess property is to hold property. And if you cannot hold property, you are an imbecile and have no rights in the law system. So that it's actually more subtle than people think, because the right to hold property is your inalienable right. If something is defined as property, you have the right to possess that property if there has been a process through bargaining where you have acquired it. So what they're saying is that nothing is yours, including, of course, your own mind. That's what this is all about, really. And we have discussed that. Of course, you can't own anything, but you have rights. You have inalienable rights. You've always had rights to be able to occupy a dwelling, construct a dwelling, and live in it without interference from the state. And those are your rights. So they're saying that that doesn't exist anymore. So they're throwing out inalienable rights and God's law. And that's what this is all about. It's about this new form of global communism is the destruction of natural law. And this, well, basically, it's Luciferian, satanically inspired global control. We've already been through this with Madame Helena Petrova Blavatsky, the fake medium, and her esoteric ramblings, and Alice Bailey and her channeled nonsense. Both of these two were narcissists and shouldn't have been in charge of a shopping trolley, right? And the UN has taken on their ideas. Blavatsky was a Satanist. That's what she says. She says, we've got a quote here. I think we read it out before. This is Blavatsky. And now it stands proven that Satan, or the red fiery dragon, the Lord of Phosphorus, and Lucifer, or light bearer, is in us. It is our mind. There you go. So in other words, they're saying that they're above God, or they want to be God. And that's what this is about, the state acting as God for God. And again, when was the biggest assumption made like that previously? I think it was 1302, Papal Bull Unam Sanctum, that there would be no possibility of redemption outside the Catholic Church. And everybody was to be owned. Everything on the earth was claimed by the Catholic Church under Unam Sanctum. It's the biggest land, property and people grab in history, apart from this. And this is even bigger, because that was an assumption. This is going a step further, and they're actually making it into a legal obligation through their criminal framework. And we've got to remember that the UN is above international law and a criminal organisation. These are facts. These are just facts, because if you're above international law and cannot be prosecuted, then that means there is no recourse against the actions of the United Nations. There's none. So people should be pretty wound up about that, but nobody seems to be, especially in the local council for some reason.
Yeah, well, it's the same with the banks as well. They're in the same position. All the big banks that are running the show, they're beyond the law and living in their own jurisdiction, carrying on like criminal behaviour constantly that makes the papers. But what's happening, a few people whine about it, you get some jokes on the comedy programmes about it, but nothing gets done. It just carries on as regard, and you know, they're having practice for all of what's being seen there in these other areas. We've got one more clip, Mark, that we haven't actually played. I don't know if you want to get that done. And
I think we should do. Yes, Tony.
Okay, shall I put that on now then?
Yes, this is about the chap. It's Huntington Park Court, isn't it? Yes, it's the council meeting on immigration. This is very interesting because this guy just lays out something that all these Antifa terrorists and all these fake lefties completely miss, and he addresses the point quite succinctly. This is quite interesting.
Yes, I'd just like to remind people that I'm with the group Community People Rising. Our two focuses are securing the border and
and bringing an end to illegal immigration. That's it. We can characterize as anti-immigrant, but to clarify one more time, we are anti-illegal immigrant. So that's that one word that everybody keeps forgetting. That's illegal. We are against illegal immigration. Now, another point is we're being called racist, white supremacists, Nazis, all this other happy-go-lucky stuff. I don't see any proof of it. We've also been called violent.
They have brought violence.
If we are violent, where are the police reports? Where are the videotapes? Where are the 911 calls? They don't exist. Another thing is, we are building a wall on the southern border now as we speak. If this is such a horrible place full of white supremacists and racists, then why are all these brown-skinned people crawling across the border? Why do we have to build a wall to keep them out if this is such a horrible place?
Flipping good question, Nat. What do you reckon, Mark?
I think he just put it succinctly, and he went completely against the politically correct fear paradigm and said it like it was. He just addressed the issue. That is a person who's addressing an issue, full on, with complete confidence and stating a fact. And that is just something you never hear now.
Yeah, for sure.
They would have pussyfooted around that on the mainstream media. They would have gone, oh yes, far right and far this and far that. And he just addressed it.
Yeah.
We're not, there's no proof, and this is what we stand for. End of story, fact. That is inalienable rights. That's what natural law is all about. And that is what they're trying to destroy.
Yep, he did a good job there. Anyway, we're heading up towards break time. I think we're probably better off leaving it till after the break before you introduce our guest. Is there anything you want to wrap up this hour with?
Not at all, Tony. I think a bit of that was like a bit rant-worthy, but I had to get a lot of information in there, so I hope people enjoyed.
Yeah, you did well. There was a lot of information in there, and it's all down there on windowsontheworld.net. You can read a lot of that there and check out some of those videos Mark was talking about. It's a really good article. Well done. We'll be back in 7.5 minutes, something like that. Cheers, everyone. Right, welcome back to Windows on the World Live, broadcasting live from autonomousmedia.net and windowsontheworld.net simultaneously, a couple of other places as well. That was Deke Jackson, 2 different tunes, played with permission from Deke. Wake Up This Morning and Hey Ho, and that was from the album I can't actually remember the name of now, and I've shut the folder down, but you can find him on YouTube, and he's got his own channel with lots more pretty excellent music, and he does some good comedy as well, telling us how the world works, and he don't take no prisoners, does Deke. Right, I think Mark's got his tea done, and he's ready to introduce our guest, so take it away, Mark.
Yes, I met Sandi down in the Sunrise Festival. We're doing talks, actually, in Avalon Rising, and of course Avalon Rising has now been banned from the Green Gathering. I can mention who they are now, because obviously we didn't want them to be associated with banned speakers who were talking about things like the weather and freedom. So that's really interesting that we were down at this festival, and Sandi is one of the only people that I've ever seen in this country anyway talking about Agenda 21. And we started talking, and Sandi lives down in Somerset, and she's been experiencing what's been going on locally. And that's where it gets interesting, because this is where the global action plan really starts to unravel itself. We find the same template being used everywhere, which means that we have no input at all. All recourse is removed, and this is a worldwide consensus. In other words, world government is God, and they are acting above and beyond their capacity. So, Sandi, when did you first get to be aware of what was going on? Because this is quite a big program, but to most people, it's quite a subtle one. They don't get it straight away. So how did you find out about it?
Well, it's funny because I've kind of done a whole 360 turnaround, because I was up until 2009 when I moved to Somerset, I was living in London, and I was really into. I got into transition towning, and I went. I did all that stuff, and I think then I was beginning to get a strange inkling that there was something not quite right. I did transition town training, and later set up Transition Town Nunhead and Peckham, there was something that didn't sit right, because during the training it was very heavily NLP, really, because I understood what NLP was. In fact, I'd trained in NLP at one point, and I could see that it could be used for good and not so good. And it is very much mind control techniques involved in it. And
could you describe what that is to the listener out there in case they're not aware of it? Because I've been aware of these techniques, but if you've actually studied NLP, it would be really helpful if you reveal what sort of things they do, which people can look for.
Yeah, it's a form of it's a form of I'm trying to explain it. It's a bit like the Delphi technique, where you're brought round to you're made to feel that you are making the decisions, but actually you're being brought round to a sort of predetermined conclusion.
Yes, just in case anyone doesn't know what the Delphi technique is, it was invented by the Rand Corporation in the 50s. It's a way of gaining group consensus. So in other words, if you've got a corporation and you want to go in a certain direction, you don't want opposition to that or friction between the employees. So what you do is you give them limited choices, and in the end, they get what they're given. That's what it is. It's the way to steer people into a predetermined outcome using what they call facilitators. And at its worst, it's incredibly Orwellian and very, very nasty. And a lot of people who go to these council meetings will come out and go, something happened to me. I've accepted something, or something has come out of that, which is not what I went in to do. And unless they understand these techniques, they can't even get beyond that far. And that's why I thought it'd be very good to bring in the Delphi and explain what that's about in relation to neuro-linguistic programming. So carry on.
Yeah, I mean, neuro-linguistic programming is a way of I think they use it a lot in big business leadership programs, and it's how to be how to get your message across and influence people, basically. And it's a lot of techniques of how to influence people and get what you want over to them so that they're more compliant to what you want, sort of thing. And that's how it was. And I also felt that there was big money behind this, because the facilitators that I met on that course were going to be flying all over the world, pushing this, the transition town agenda. And I suddenly realised that it was actually much bigger, and who was funding it and what was going on here. So it was more than I'd done it with all good faith, thinking, I really want to sort of get into local things and start doing good things, which is what transition towning. That's the appeal that most Greens.
So, sorry, Sandi, who was actually funding it? Did you find out?
Well, it's difficult because it was run by this guy called Rob Hoskins. I think you may have heard of him. And I don't know where the funding came from. And this is what I couldn't get. I mean, I'm imagining now it could have been the EU. I don't know. I didn't get into where it was being funded at the time. All I knew is I just got this absolute aversion to having anything to do with it. I just really felt that there was something fundamentally not quite right, and I didn't know what that was at the time. But now I do, because after that I did move. I moved to Somerset in 2009, having set that all up sort of around 2006 when I was in London, and then I came back. I came to live in Somerset, and I think what happened then was I moved here, and there was terrible flooding going on, and it was basically down sort of on the Somerset levels, and I had got involved with I'd started looking into things like geoengineering and stuff, and I'd actually gone down there with a film crew to help with, and they were making a film about geoengineering, and I realised that actually they were kind of, they wanted an opportunity to get their agenda across. And actually, when I went down to the levels, I could see that the people, the local people, they were fed up with film crews because the BBC had been down there, Sky News had been down there, everyone had been down there, but nobody had helped them. The levels had flooded, and it was really bad flooding, and there were no government agencies helping at all. It was the locals, and weirdly, there was a whole organisation of Sikhs, a Sikh organisation. They were an aid relief organisation, and they'd flown in, called Khalsa Aid, and they were incredible. They were helping night and day, rescuing people, and there was no army. There was the Environment Agency were just panicking. I don't think they did anything in those first few days. And there was nobody helping these people. There was 65 square miles of Somerset underwater, and people had lost their homes. They were stranded. They were, cold, wet, and nobody was doing anything. And I thought, this is really weird. So I actually said to the people I was working with, I think we should just get out of here, but actually I think we should help. And I started helping to sandbag because, at night, the river Parrot was rising. And, it was all the operations were being led by the local pub, which is the King Alfred at the bottom of Borough Mump, and the landlord there was amazing, and it was the centre of operations, and the only people that were helping were the locals and this aid organisation, these Sikh people who were wonderful, and I began to think, well, what's going on here? Why isn't anybody doing anything about this? And a few days later, the film crews were still arriving, and then the army arrived for literally a couple of hours, actually, where they did a photo opportunity with the BBC, sandbagging in a line, like one sandbag going along a line of army guys, and then they cleared off. And I thought, oh, that's weird. That was for news at 10 or something, I don't know. But it was just very odd. So I began to do my own research on it, and realised that there was something amiss. Historically, all the Reens and the rivers around the Somerset levels had been managed by the National Rivers Authority, in tandem with the local farmers. They used to sort of monitor the levels of everything. They used to dredge the Reens, every year. The Reens were dredged so that the water flowed back to the sea. And for some reason, the Environment Agency took over in 1995. Now, they hadn't dredged the Reens for what seemed like decades. And there was a strange agenda that I began to look at, because there was a flooding directive by the EU called Natura 2000 strategy. And it was a directive on habitats, birds and animals, and water habitats for animals, and it was put into operation on the Ramsar Treaty, which was apparently in 1971. It was held in Iran. It was another of these sort of EU treaty things, and it was sustainable management of wetlands. Now, in 2007, the Floods Directive from the Environment Agency required that certain floodplains in the UK should be allowed to be flooded under the Ramsar Treaty, which, and of course, it was all about flooding what they said was natural wetlands. But actually, forget that. These had been reclaimed, and people were actually living there and had businesses there and, were working in that area. So it seemed odd that they decided at some point in 2007 to actually flood these wetlands. And in fact, Baroness Young, who was at that point, she was the person in charge of this kind of floodplain flooding. To do which she was the director of the Environment Agency. there was a policy document, and it went from sort of 1 to 6, and 1 is where flood defences were a priority, and number 6 was to promote biodiversity by actually allowing and increasing the flooding, and the Somerset Levels area near Boroughbridge fell under that Environment Agency Policy 6. So in 2007, now it was flooded in 2013, I think it was, 14, sorry. So in 2007, it had already been predestined to be a flood area, that they were deliberately going to flood it, which absolutely knocked me for six. I thought, well, this is absolutely mad. You know, they're saying that it's to protect wildlife, particularly wetland birds, but they'd already spent a fortune building a bird reserve down in Shapwick. So there was a place where the birds could be preserved, where all the twitchers go, all the bird watchers go. So why did they flood the Somerset Levels? Why did they allow it to flood? And it was a deliberate flooding. I mean, Baroness Young was quoted as saying that, you know, by far the cheapest way to create wetland habitats for wildlife would be to simply flood the areas, just add water. And she'd like to see a limpet mine attached to every pumping station on the Somerset Levels. So this was her directive. This was Baroness Young's directive from the EU directive of the Ramsar Treaty to deliberately flood the Somerset Levels. And, you know, there's also, you know, the Reens hadn't been dredged for decades, so nothing could the water couldn't escape to the sea. And they also there was another factor. There was an old pumping station. So it was a munitions factory on the Levels near. It was at Wollavington, and it was called the Royal Ordnance Factory. It was a munitions factory that was commissioned in, I think it was 1941, and it was decommissioned in 2008. Now it was a steam. It was a steam factory. It was worked on steam, and it took hundreds of thousands of gallons a day from the Somerset Levels, and it to function. And when they decommissioned it in 2008, they informed the Environment Agency and said, "You do realise that when we stop using all these hundreds of thousands of gallons, you know, per week or whatever it is they use, a heck of a lot of water, the water table of the levels will rise. We're just warning you." And the Environment Agency took no notice at all. It was almost as though it didn't matter, underestimated or that this was going to cause a problem. And, you know, it just seems that there was this whole thing about putting EU directives and sustainability about wildlife habitats and biodiversity above those of the people and the farming community that actually live there.
That's really important, and that's a big part of it, isn't it? Because they undermine the local farmers, and we see that all over the place. But this goes into the wetlands and the wildlands project, doesn't it? And
Absolutely.
of course, nobody's heard of this stuff. In fact, in Waltham Forest, there is a biodiversity plan for Waltham Forest, as there is for everywhere else in the country, but you just haven't seen it. And I know somebody who had access to that biodiversity. It's a biodiversity treaty, really, for the Hackney Marshes. And the Hackney Marshes are going to be carbon neutral. They're saying that in public, but this is the same as the wetlands and the wildlands project. Now, the wetlands project is what Sandy's been describing. It's basically stopping rivers from being dredged and allowing nature to completely take over, or helping nature to recover land and take it away from human habitation. That's what it's all about. An interesting side issue here was that a friend of mine lives down there, and she was saying that local businesses and people were being encouraged to claim on their insurance for flooding, even if they hadn't really been flooded. Now, of course, that's going to appeal to the greed of people, but in actual fact, it's going to turn the place into an uninsurable floodplain. Now, is that something that you came across, Sandy?
Well, yes. I mean, there were people, and it was very interesting how some people made claims for their properties because some of them had, literally water was halfway up the building. And everything had been destroyed in the house, and they couldn't live in their houses. People had to move into caravans and live with friends and try and rescue whatever stuff they had, put it into storage. And then they made their claims. Now it's interesting. Some people were insured. And their insurance companies honoured that, and other people weren't insured at all. It was an act of God, and so it depends. I have no idea what the criteria was, but there were people who had experienced the same devastation, and they some were insured, some weren't. And what I thought was amazing, and this really shows you how when disasters happen, how brilliant people are. There was a building firm who offered their services and their workmen for free to anybody who wasn't insured. And a lot of the people who weren't insured had their properties completed and renovated back far sooner than the people who were, because the insurance companies dragged their heels. But to be honest, the people have that area is now a real problem area as far as buying and selling properties goes. A lot of people after the flood couldn't face going back to live there, and their houses were put to auction at half the price of the market value of the properties. And people did lose their businesses, and there was a farmer and his wife who all their cattle had to go, and I don't think the cattle haven't come back because the land is not good enough to put them on. It's just not growing the way it did, and it is interesting that all this was done in the name of protecting the habitat for wild animals. But actually, you look at the flooding, and the hedgerows were all underwater. How many hedgehogs died? How many? When finally the water receded, and the locals were saying, we've got to dredge these reeds, we've got to dredge the reeds. They held up the dredging. The Environment Agency held up the dredging to catch water voles who'd made their habitat in the silt of the river that needed to be dredged. So they held it all up to catch the water voles, take them to Sussex, and then reintroduce them once it had been dredged, which sounds very worthy. Oh, yes, we're helping nature and everything. But the fact is that is a nonsense, because I saw roe deer belly up floating down the river. It wasn't the river, it was actually a field. But, these roe deer had all drowned. And
I think that's the thing about this, though, Sandy, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, it goes into what they consider is sustainable for them and what's sustainable for the agenda. So it's not really about sustaining animal life and wildlife. It's actually about sustaining the agenda. Yeah.
It's a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse to bring in control of the environment, which is what they want. They want to control the rural areas, and they want to get people out of the rural areas and make it as difficult as possible for people to live in certain rural areas, because they need the whole idea about United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development is to control the land and to get people off the land and into the cities, into urban areas. And this is happening. We know. I mean, you've probably talked about. I know you've talked about it in other shows, but it's a whole agenda to control the rural areas, or to make sure, just depopulate them, and get people out of the rural areas.
Well, as we've stated, it's happening all over America, and America is a lot bigger than here, and it's got a lot more kind of offbeat rural areas than we have. But we have plenty here, and I'm seeing this everywhere, and it's starting to impact on people. A lot of the stuff that was in the background is now coming into the foreground.
Yeah.
For instance, there's signs up in North Wales where it said Red Squirrel Woodland. Now, they're going to use that as an excuse. If somebody may have planning permission there, they can use that as an excuse for them not to build. Say, well, you're on the red squirrel woodland. This is the whole thing about what they're called social equity, is it goes into everything. And under sustainable development, we have no rights because our rights are reduced to the same as, say, a stone that's been there for a few thousand years, which they consider is part of the environment, and they consider that as to be a community. So anything under sustainable development can be regarded as a community. Anything inanimate can be a community. And so they can pick and choose with whatever reasons they want to give for depopulating. That's where the trick is here, isn't it? It's actually not about an environmental program. And we have covered that. We've actually got the quotes and we put them into a show that this is not an environmental program. And that's clearly stated by people high up in the UN. And we put the quotes into our previous shows, which is very, very interesting. So, again, it's about the public are being treated as turkeys voting for Christmas. They're voting for their own enslavement on the back of a lie, which is about global governance and the stripping away of all their rights. And we have inalienable rights. If we want to live in the countryside, we should be able to do that. And it's not up to state government or any world government to tell us otherwise. And that is why people who are now considered to be right-wing don't like it. So what the left have done, or the fake left, because they're not really left, they're actually they're more, well, they're left. They're as left as Stalin, but probably a bit further than that, But none of it means anything, as we've been saying. But basically, we're being dictated to by a technocracy and a corporatocracy and a bureaucracy that is totally and utterly unaccountable.
I mean, it's interesting because the technocracy movement, started in the 1930s. This is how far it goes back as far as technocracy is concerned. And it is interesting that, their agenda is a resource-based economy where energy is the currency. And this is what they're trying this is what they want. So they're bringing it in sort of subversively by, saying we're climate change, is happening, and global warming is happening, so they can bring in this energy-based economy, using carbon trades and cap and trade and carbon footprints, to actually be the controller of humanity. These taxes, these carbon taxes, will be the currency, and we'll pay heavily for this. If it goes through, and scientists and engineers will control all the resources and the consumption, and micromanage, us, sort of thing. And it's they want to control compliant, limited, population, and even in their, it's a social engineering operation. And
that's exactly what it is, and it's done on many, many levels. And this is why I think that the public have a problem with it, because they seem to think that, well, if it was that big, we'd know about it. And of course, the public are never told about anything as big or important as this, ever.
And a lot of them don't bother to look. If this is all, the whole agenda. I mean, even the Technocracy magazine says, it's our aim to distribute goods and services to the entire population, data-driven, science-driven management of society. Now, nobody's asked for that. Nobody's, the people don't want that. We don't want a data-driven, science-driven, management of society. So, how did this happen? And people are, they're not getting it at all. And I think really, the best we can do, as I said before, is just to plant seeds so that when people do finally begin to see that their governments do not have their best interests at heart, they'll penny or drop and they'll say, "Oh, that's what Mark Windows was talking about," And
and you as well. I mean,
it's
interesting because you don't live too far away from Glastonbury, which is a big centre of the New Age, isn't it? And those sort of people don't get it at all. It's astonishing that they seem to want to learn about esoteric things, yet something like this, which can be just seen online, they don't want to believe. And that is very, very clever, isn't it? Because that's another part of the subversion, is that, especially I find that with change agents, when change agents, which are people who come in to impose these things on the local community, and they start calling it their community when they've just been given a job there, when confronted with difficult questions, they actually say things such as, I don't want to hear that. And that is incredible. That is incredible, isn't it?
They say, oh, that's negative. And if you negative thoughts create negativity, so you mustn't mention it. You mustn't mention anything that could possibly be negative, because it doesn't fit in with their ideology of positive thinking. Manifesting positivity. And I know to a degree, that can be so, but you can't blinker yourself to the destruction of this planet, which is what inevitably will happen. And it's the very thing that they think is actually saving the planet is destroying it. Well,
exactly, because it's not environmentalism at all. Cool. It's just about control. And it's all done through corporates. For instance, if you look at those videos from California, those officials, those people running the One Bay area, they all arrive in huge four-wheel drive Jeeps on their own. They're all incredibly overweight, so they're using lots of resources. So under Agenda 21, they would be the first to go. And they don't seem to realise that. The irony is lost on them, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Champagne Marxists. It's all very well so long as it doesn't stop me from driving my 4x4 and, living in my big house and watching my big television. The minute that's in danger of being taken away, suddenly the penny might drop. It's just crazy, isn't it?
Well, yes, and I think that the thing is with this, it's very, very clever because it's psychological. It's like what you were saying when you started seeing something wrong with transition towns. Now, I remember transition towns in Waltham Forest, and we went there. There were several of us, all climate change deniers. We all went there, and we were asked to measure our carbon footprint. And we were asked to walk as far across the room with as much carbon as we thought we'd produce in a week. And it was so ridiculous that somebody just said, this is pointless. It doesn't mean anything, and sat down, and everybody else did. And the guy who was running it was actually shocked. But there was people there who were quite well-meaning. They were old-fashioned lefty greenists. And they were completely perplexed as to why we were being negative. And we were not being negative. We were just challenging their implanted beliefs. And again, we were saying that about this new education system. It doesn't matter about facts. It's beliefs that count. And this, again, is a big part of the subversion. And again, we can look to the KGB to explain what this is about. There's several interviews with Yuri Bezmenov. There's this one I was watching, is how left and right, or right and wrong, two lies are given to the public, and they're left to fight over them. And they do. So the real knowledge and the real point of it all is lost. Now, with something as big as this, it's beyond most people's scope, because they still think that their local council is accountable. Well, here's an example when a local council is not accountable. Grenfell Tower. The local council was removed. All accountability was removed, and the narrative was completely controlled. I went into every detail of that on the Richie Allen show. And with all of those things that I said in there were prescient, because I've learned how this stuff works, and anybody can learn how it works. It's not a secret, and there's no conspiracies. There's no hidden conspiracies. There's conspiracies, but there's none of them are hidden. They're all in the open. So what people think are things that are beyond the scope of possibilities are only beyond the scope of possibilities because they are given such narrow information. And that's all it is. That the public watch BBC and Sky News, and even members of my family have said, well, if it was that important, it'd be on telly.
Of course.
And you just, when they say that, you are absolutely gobsmacked, because it means that they are incapable of critical thought.
Yeah.
Because what's actually presented on the television is just PR. It's public relations stuff, and it has been for a long time. I mean, I go on a lot about this, but when especially cable TV took off, obviously it's been America for a very long time, but there was a book that came out in the late 80s called Toxic Sludge is Good for You, which defined exactly how mainstream media and mainstream news had been taken over by public relations. And we only have to look about what we're being fed about the Iraq war with Nurse Nahira, who was the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter, saying that she'd seen babies thrown out of incubators. It was all propagated by a PR company called Hill and Knowlton and these neocon Zionists like Tom Lantos, absolute criminals. And the thing is that even after the public had been told that it was completely false, which was in 2 weeks, it didn't affect us going into that war. So that goes to show you that the agenda will always continue. People never get this. So with something like what we're talking about, they're beginning to see it. But I think that when people generally go to these council meetings, and I used to go to them in Waltham Forest, and you'd always know that there was something really subversive going on, and you weren't a part of it, but you couldn't put your finger on what it was. And it was just the language they were using and the predetermined outcomes. Now, the thing is that unless you know that there's a predetermined outcome, then you're not going to realise that there is one. So you're just going to come out confused. And that's what I found with all those people stopped going to these council meetings because these people had waffle on about themselves, these egotistic people who had basically been given a lot of money for doing absolutely nothing. These sort of projects like creating these diversity programs and this nonsense, which is just bits of the Human Rights Act written down with vibrant and diverse and this and that and the usual sustainable development type language.
It's all a kind of, it's all a certain fluffy language, and they talk in all those terms like diversity and inclusion and all this, and it all sounds really worthy, and in my former days of being sort of, completely, believing that they had our interests at heart, I would be sucked in by it, because it's all about, being fair and doing, setting up things for people to get involved in the community, and social inclusion and social entrepreneurs and all this kind of thing. But actually, you look behind that subversive language, that Milton Erickson hypnotic language, you see that actually there's something else going on, and it's to get people on their side. That is exactly what it's for. It's to get people bought and paid for because they're giving them funding for things that they want to do. And that's how they're drawing people in, and the NGOs are employing a lot of people. So people that actually are setting up all these entrepreneurial leadership programs in local community hubs, as they call them, are actually they believe in it because that they're being employed to do it, and they're handing out funding to people. And what happens then is those people become kind of hypnotized to think that actually, ICLEI, which is, I'll talk about ICLEI in a minute, that sustainable development is a really good thing because it's given us all this funding to do things that we like doing, like sewing groups and whatever it might be. It might be screen printing, or it might be taking photographs. There's all this government funding, which is EU funding, to set up these social hubs, community hubs.
Social,
all sound fantastic. Yeah.
Social enterprises, social entrepreneurs,
exactly.
and community interest companies are all at the heart of this. And you get these people turning up. And yes, the community hub appears, but the community hub isn't a community centre. It's a monitoring station, basically.
Yeah.
And it's run by people who you think, oh, there's loads of little old ladies in here, all being very busy and helpful, but they're the volunteers, because a big part of this poverty economy under United Nations Agenda 21 is everyone works for nothing and nobody has anything. That's the whole point of it. You're not allowed to actually make any money. That is it. That's what social equity is. It means everybody's poor. It means everybody's working for nothing. It means nobody has any aspirations. Nobody can achieve anything. And that's the whole point of social equity. That's exactly what it means. And when you look at these places, it's really interesting, because in Waltham Forest, I found it sinister and creepy the way it was actually put across. A newspaper appeared called the Waltham Forest Echo, and that came out of the community hub called the Mill, and that was run by somebody who called himself Social Spider, and Social Spider is a thing that they all communicate on. Now, what's a spider? A spider sits in its web waiting for its victims to fall into it. So it's a very, very odd and strange kind of language that they use through all of this. And some of it is really, really sinister and creepy. And that's just below the surface of all this fluffy stuff. Have you come across this, Sandy?
Yeah, I have actually. There is a community hub that was bought by the community under the localism thing, the Localism Act.
Localism Act, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what year it was, but anyway, the Localism Act came in, and if there was a place that was lying dormant, and we did have this kind of derelict building near us that, in the end, the local mayor set up a company called Fair Shares, which was a bit like the Plunkett Foundation. It would help finance a community hub by raising local shareholders to put money into it, and to use the thing of the whole Localism Act to raise that money, because it was a place. We needed somewhere for young people to go, because there wasn't enough facilities for young people, and for training in to get them off off the unemployment register, all that worthy stuff. So the money was raised. A lot of shareholders put money into it. And it was set up, and it was supposed to be that. It was supposed to be for, but what they did was they sold out to another company, which is a big, I think they're a chain. It's called Boca Bar. And so Boca Bar actually occupy most of that building now. There's a few artist studios at the top. A lot of the art, but the rents are going up and up and up, and a lot of the local artists can't afford it. So there's kind of a middle class echelon of sort of artists up there and craftspeople who can afford it. And even, local yoga teachers can't afford the rents to rent the space to do their yoga. And there's a community garden there, which was set up in all good faith. It was a community garden run by volunteers, obviously, as usual. And they've got bees there, and they've got all sorts of amazing things they're doing. But
it's sustainable.
It's sustainable, indeed. But they wanted to open up a pop-up cafe in the summer, but they weren't allowed to, because the big boys, the Boca Bar, would not allow them to do it. Now, where's the democracy in that? You've got people making vast profits who are paying rent to I don't know, to the foundation who own the building, which is all the shareholders. But where's that money going? Why do they have such, why do they have a huge corporate really in there occupying most of the space? A for-profit, organisation there. So it's not what it was supposed to be set up to do. It's very
no, exactly, and we find that a lot, and that's what a lot of this so-called regeneration is all about in London. It's about corporate corporates coming in. I mean, massive corporates. Lend-Lease and Bechtel are the preferred partners for most of these councils. Yeah. And they say there's a consultation process, and it's blatantly obvious there never is. And of course, what happens is, with all of this stuff, this so-called sustainable development, this is where it's not sustainable, because self-employment is not sustainable, because self-employed people get kicked out and they bring in huge corporate partners. So in other words, the future is the city village. It's the walkable city. The sustainable community is all about high density, tiny housing, which costs a fortune, and you will be in a place surrounded by traffic chaos until everyone has to get out of their car and give them up forever. And you will be surrounded by a gated community with eye scanners. You'll have your mini Tesco or Asda's or Walmart and your gym, and you'll have your corporate bars, which are absolutely sterile and boring. And the whole of London will be like that. That's the plan, so that you don't have to go anywhere, because everywhere is the same. There's no point in going out for a night in London unless you're going to go to the few privileged places like the theatres and all these sort of places where basically the corporates go. It's mainly corporate type events and very expensive theatre, and all the little places where you could go and get a cheap drink and watch somebody up and coming or somebody interesting, heaven forbid, are being closed down.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I run a bar and music. I mean, a pub and music venue, and it's what, in a way, it's a proper community hub. It's not the fake one, which is down the road. It's a proper community hub where people, people actually meet and discuss things and talk. And I don't know. I do get quite a lot of hassle from because I obviously have to maintain my own license, and it's really difficult running your own business with all this kind of pressure on you to. I just get the feeling that it's a bit of a how can I put it? We're a bit of a pariah, because it's full of people that chat and free thinkers, and it's not. Well,
this is exactly what they don't want, and of course, this is what the social justice warriors and all these people into social equity and all this nonsense, which is basically iron fist communism, don't understand. That the state will use its corporate partners. You are not involved or invited at the end of the day. All of this is about corporate state control and global governance. It's got nothing to do with you. You are there to obey it, and that is what it's about. And these people who go around trying to disrupt other little music venues and just give people hassle, and the petty bureaucrats and the change agents and all these traitors who are trying to destroy what is interesting in this country, well, they're going to get what they deserve in the end, because they're going to get this boring, bland technocracy, 24-hour monitoring, eye scanners, total misery if this stuff comes in. And it's coming in ever more quickly, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's literally, I mean, I was trying to identify, sort of when things began to speed up. And I think it was really interesting. There's a three major events really that kind of, the Paris Agreement of 2015, the 2030 agenda, which conference that came in 2013, and the Habitat Free conference in Quito. And all of these kind of happened really from 2013 onwards. And, you've got the Pope endorsing 2030,
That's
which
right.
was, Obama, that, bringing that in a couple of years ago. It was 2016 or 2015, I think it was. Anyway, so you've got these agendas. So they've already said, well, Agenda 21 is kind of complete virtually. So we're moving into Agenda 2030, endorsed by the Pope. So we know that all roads lead to Rome with the Club of Rome. We know that it's some kind of agenda which is driven by the people who believe themselves to rule.
Well, it helps that the Vatican are on board because, of course, this is being promoted as a religion, and of course the Vatican is now into multi-faith, and of course inclusion of all other religions. So they are promoting the one world religion.
Yeah, and it is a one world. I mean, the whole climate change thing is like a religion, and every religion has to have an apocalypse. And their apocalypse is that we are destroying the planet, and if we don't conform to what they say we have to, then we're destroying the planet. This is our apocalypse. And it's a nonsense. It's the biggest scam ever. It's the very thing that they think that the people that believe climate change. Well, let's call it global warming, because they changed it to climate change because they realised the planet wasn't heating up. I mean, it's that in itself is proof of the fact that they changed it to climate change. And it's the biggest lie, and it's worse than a political lie. It's worse than the politicians lying, because actually it's a universal lie. It's a lie that is just there, and it's being used to control people and to manipulate people, and it's the biggest scam. It's the biggest scam.
Well, it certainly is. It's the biggest scam in human history, I think, because I don't think there's been the opportunity for a scam so big, because it took a long time for the United Nations to get going, because it was the League of Nations that didn't really work. And they were incorporated in 1948 with their Charter of the United Nations. And the whole thing, when you look at it, is like a science fiction kind of dystopian story, because if you look at the things that they believe in and what they promote, it is like something out of a science fiction movie. But as we know, science fiction movies are promoted because they will tell us what's going to happen, and they will acclimatize us to what's going to happen.
Yeah. Exactly, and it's all done by suggestion. They're suggesting everything, and particularly through films and stuff that this is normalizing everything. So we're more compliant if we are actually susceptible to that. And I think there's a few of us, thank God, who don't watch television and don't get sucked into all that, because that is how people are being controlled by the media. So I steer clear of most media, apart from, the true facts that I research myself, because I can't trust anything else. Nobody can. But a lot of people don't realise that. And they're actually believing the BBC. And, and the BBC push out so much stuff, ice caps melting and polar bears drowning and all sorts of things. And and people really do believe it. They believe that this is all happening. And, you've got TED Talks, It didn't take me long to look at the movers and shakers in the Club of Rome, and Ted Turner is one of them. And interestingly enough, I mean, we were talking about the New Age. I actually wrote down a few people. Yeah, the New Age, the Club of Rome. You've got Deepak Chopra's in the Club of Rome.
Oh, yes, the man
Barbara Marx Hubbard. Yes. Barbara Marx Hubbard. Yeah. Marianne Williamson, she's a spiritual activist. Robert Thurman, who's the assistant to the Dalai Lama. You've got Daisu Ikeda, who's the Soka Gakkai Buddhist leader. These people are in the Club of Rome. Now, why? Why are they next to people like all the movers and shakers like George Soros and
because Sandy, they're positive thinkers.
Exactly,
they're positive thinkers, and they're detached from negativity, and that brings you abundance.
Exactly. And I just think, well, these people have been brought into the Club of Rome for a very good reason, and it takes us back to our original timeline of Agenda 21. And how it was actually a plan to get the whole of the New Age movement dumbed down into, well, you just have to meditate and I'm not saying there's anything wrong in meditation, but
I think it's about the interpretation of what meditation is, because a lot of people think that meditation is basically something that it isn't. I mean, I had a chat with Robin Gibb obviously before he died, because he was involved with this Brahma Kumaris, and they are heavily involved with the UN. I did quite a lot of filming for them, and they promote meditation. But he had the right idea about meditation, because what it's about is just stilling yourself and allowing yourself to actually observe what's around you. But a lot of this stuff is about detaching yourself from what's around you. Now, that isn't actually meditation.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sandi, it looks as though we've run out of time. I'll have to bring you on earlier next time, and we can structure it a bit more, because I did go on a bit in the first hour, but I had such a lot to put in there.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for coming on.
Hold on. I've got a question from chat that I need to ask Sandi.
Yes.
Excellent chat, by the way. Well done. It's from James reporting. It's good to see a new name in the chat as well. Well done, James. And he wants to know, regarding the Somerset levels and the deliberate flooding, is anybody actually taking any legal action against those responsible for what happened there?
Do you know what? I don't know. I really don't know. And I should find out, because I'm, I think a lot of people were told about the deliberate flooding. And there was a journalist called Christopher Booker, who actually got an article published in the Telegraph about how he had done, he'd researched it back to Policy 6, but I don't know. I really don't know, because it's very difficult to challenge these people. How do Baroness Young should really be, in the firing line for this, because she was the head of the Environment Agency that actually put the directive together of Policy 6. So, and she, I think she should be lynched. I think, well, at least brought to account. I don't know. It's very interesting. I don't know. Maybe people were so busy trying to, save their homes and get back to normal that they're just grateful that they're back to normal. I don't know. It's probably, I should go down and talk to a few of them. I know a lot of people left. I mean, certainly Jim, who ran the pub, he was sick to death of being flooded. His place was a real centre for operations when it happened. But so many people just got disillusioned and left.
That's what happens, though, isn't it? Because
it's very sad. They get beaten up. Yeah.
The bureaucracy slows things down. This is what the Soviet system was all about. It demoralizes people because you can never get anywhere with the system. The system won't respond, so you get worn out with the system and you get sick of fighting the system, and in the end you accept the system. So let's not do that, and let's keep going at them, just like those people in those short audios we played tonight. That was very encouraging and very funny. And
also, even if you did take it further, with the way our injustice system works now, and it is an injustice system, would you get justice? No, you wouldn't, because we don't have a proper rule of law. And there's no, you could take this and it would be covered up. It would have been, there's no point. And that's what I think people know that. In their hearts, they know it, and they've given up.
Yeah. As James said, though, there was certainly harm and loss caused down there. And it would undoubtedly be a minefield trying to get some remedy for that. And you would need to understand fully jurisdiction and personal liability to have any chance at all. So, but that's a story for another show. We've had a really good show tonight. And I've really enjoyed listening to that second hour and the first as well. Mark, he was on fire there again. We've overrun a bit, so I'm gonna shut it down now, and I'd like to say thanks to everyone for listening, especially those that contributed in chat. There's more shows coming up this week. You can check the schedule on the homepage at autonomousmedia.net for them. The pod will be up in a couple of hours, and I'm sure Mark will have it on YouTube tomorrow.
Join me, Mark Windows, with Tony Hurst for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT at autonomousmedia.net.